Freedom is merely privilege extended unless enjoyed by one and all.
All we are doing with this bill is allowing two people who love each other to have that love recognised by way of marriage. That is all we are doing.
Hello, and welcome to Rainbow Shelter News. This is the first episode on Twitch. I know previously it was on the Fluid Voice channel. Stuff kind of became a mess. It'll still be on there. Just VODs of these Twitch streams. A whole set of reasons. Stuff's complicated. I mean, this show is very much my baby. This show's my little baby. No, it's very much something I put a lot of heart and soul into, and it's just a lot easier if I do it myself and if I do it on my channel. For a number of reasons. Partially so I don't have to keep logging out and logging back into Twitch, which is its own complicated thing. So, if you're new here, welcome. I'm Ozma In The Dark. I still have blue eyes, still utilize she, they pronouns, have brown hair, am wearing an Invader Zim t-shirt, and have posters on the wall in the background. And you can very easily see the blue snowball mic, right? That I'm talking into with the pop filter. And the reason I named this show Rainbow Shelter News is because I wanted it to be a relatively safe place for all LGBTQ people, because there's problems with racism and ableism in the LGBTQ community, and I wanted to say, hey, this place is a place that's okay for you to show up. But I also wanted to try to frame it in such a way that I'm not saying that I necessarily fit into those separate marginalized communities. At the very least, that was my intent with all of this. So we're going to start off with some dark stuff. So I'm going to keep my hand up like this and also pop back into this video size when we're done with the LGBTQ deaths, because I wanted to mention them weekly at the start, because we are here to fight for the fallen. So I'm going to start that in 5. You can mute it or go elsewhere if you're live, but yeah, I'm going to start that in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, start with a generous and caring gay bar patron dies after being punched by bouncer. So apparently, bouncer at a gay bar in Philadelphia faces murder charges after punching and killing a gay patron. Now, people don't think punches can kill people. Punches definitely can kill people. The temple is like the weakest point. Police said was escorted outside before 1 a.m. for being intoxicated. The bouncer returned and punched him in the face, causing him to fall to the ground and hit his head. He was rushed to the hospital and died. Apparently he was a school committee board or a school committee member, and it's sad to see his loss and sad to be aware. It's awful what happened, and it'll be a tragic loss for Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia district where he resided. Similarly, rapper Kid Creole jailed for 16 years for killing a homeless man he thought was gay. Now, just to be clear, this sort of bigotry is everywhere, and I don't want to imply that there are various people in rapping communities, music communities, I mean, who are really accepting, and I mean, plenty of black people are, and there's some people who are loud and awful. But yeah, the 62-year-old, I guess, potentially even retired rapper, thought I was gay, and because I thought he was gay and he was saying that to me, what's up? I was thinking that he was thinking I was gay, which is not a good reason. And yeah, it was a violent and senseless crime, although obviously that's not the only thing with anyone, but this was still a crime done because of homophobia and the fear put into a lot of cishet people about the idea of even being thought of as gay. And finally, a black trans teen fatally shot while heroically protecting a friend at a party. This is another black trans death. I know I'm white. Very white. I'm not in anywhere near as much risk as black trans people. Questioned her gender identity before allegedly shot her multiple times. This is vicious hate. And this is not a new thing. This isn't even like the thing that the awful courts made into law. This is bad. There's not a lot more to say about this. So, I will slowly lower my hand. My arm is tired holding in place. It's my exercise. Oh god. It's my left-handed exercise. That sounds so bad out of context. Get back to the news. Texas senior suing school district for prohibiting him from attending graduation because of his locks. So this is a problem in general. Basically, black people's hair is seen as unprofessional by way too much of society. So they probably wanted him to look professional or whatnot, and apparently things... Yeah. Greg's the locks are an expression of his black identity and culture, and says the district's dress code policy, which prohibits boys from growing hair past their ears and eyebrows, which, by the way, also transphobic. Just gonna say that. It's almost like there's some intersection oftentimes with people where they're trying to create an idyllic version of humanity. But yeah, so he filed a lawsuit and argues Gray was disproportionately targeted and penalized by the school's dress policy, which profiles, singles out, and burdens black students who wear hair in its natural state. Yeah, because, from what I've heard, once again, very obvious, but I am super white, so black people know way more about this than me, because my hair is naturally like the way it is. But straightening out hair is a nightmare, and way extra effort that people shouldn't be put through, from what I've heard. Yeah, the length of locks have no bearing on black students' capacity to learn, and yet the wholly arbitrary dress and hair policy restricts the mobility of black students in public and private spaces, denies them equal opportunities, and strikes at the freedom and dignity of NISC black student population, reads the lawsuit. NISC, that must be the school in Texas. This is happening in Texas, by the way, because of course it is. And yeah, part of hair and culture, yeah. Gross placed in school suspension and told they would remain there until he agreed to cut his locks. Which, that is so many levels of racist and disrespectful, and I think people forget how bad it is. According to the lawsuit, no accommodations were made because there's a plea for accommodation to the principal. Oh god. You'll cut your hair right to the right point. The district sorry. Everything about that just sounded like racist Southern person, and I did a terrible accent there, but District Superintendent Curtis Rhodes said in a previous lawsuit that we've consistently been conservatively dressed, very conservatively disciplined. It's no secret what our policy is. You'll cut your hair to the right point. Basically, policy is based around white nationalist thinking. Gray stayed in in-school suspension until early April when he was told that he ran out of days he could be in suspension, according to the court records. He was told that if he showed up in school on April 15th without having cut his hair, he would be sent to the disciplinary alternative education program and not allowed to attend the commencement ceremony and other extracurricular activities, also said in the lawsuit. April 19th, Gray showed up at school, hair uncut, and lawsuit filed. Good for Gray. Like, the school system being super racist. As a result of being targeted, removed from a certain population, and threatened with not being allowed to participate in senior year activities, Gray's emotional health has suffered, including stress and depression, the lawsuit states, which, yeah, it would. The district's hostile and wrongful actions individually and in the aggregate have made Gray feel unwelcome, ostracized, and inferior. I know, it's a shock that a racist school policy would try to make black people feel inferior for existing. Which also admittedly fits into the disfigurement clauses, which have been in law before as well. Just if you're too different from a white cishet person, well, you're seen as inferior by some people. So, also in Texas, the University of Texas education program helping students with intellectual disabilities pursue careers. So, Elevar, they're calling it UNT Elevar, is a 4-year inclusive post-secondary education program for students with intellectual disabilities. Now, I don't know about the capability of this to get stuff done. Yeah, the ugly laws all over again, yes. It's the same mentality as that, the previous story. So, this is the first of its kind in North Texas, apparently. The UNT Elevar. So they're trying to remove barriers, try and be helpful and supportive. Anyone with intellectual disabilities can be in a college. Doesn't matter what you have, what you do. They shouldn't have to be told no to go to college. Through the UNT Elevator program, he's studying biology. I want to be a pediatric orthopedic surgeon when I grow up, and Sweden said, and I want to pay it forward and help kids with orthopedic problems. So Elevar students take classes with other mean green students. After 4 years, they'll earn. And that's not an intellectual disability, so I don't know why they asked that person. That's a different disability that person has. After 4 years, they'll earn a certificate that the university hopes will elevate their chances of landing a competitive job. 10 new students have already been admitted to the Elevar class and will start this fall. So I don't know if this is going to work, because this isn't going to get rid of discrimination. I'm actually kind of concerned that the net result will be saying on your applications that, hey, you have a disability. I do appreciate that they're trying to do something, and like I said, I'm not an arbiter of all the facts with disability related rights. That's just my first impression. I'm concerned about that, but like at the same time, it's a step. It's an attempted step. of some sort. At the very least, it seems to be. So, an anonymous donor pays around $300K to cover more than 100 graduates at Texas. We're still in Texas news, by the way. More than 300K to cover more than 100 graduates at Texas's Wiley College. You're debt free. So historically black college in Texas. A lot of people are getting their debts taken care of, which is just, you forget how good people can be sometimes. It's easy to forget that with society the way that it is, but some people will put in the effort, apparently, and to try to do something which will have monumental positive impact on black communities in terms of trying to add some economics in there. Now, there are other barriers. I'm well aware that there are other barriers, like how streets are set up and buses and all sorts of things, which is its own sort of form of segregation, and the ability to get a job easily in your location is still difficult, but this is still something. This is something that'll add to it'll help get rid of or compensate the black community for the ways in which black people have been disenfranchised. So I'm very happy for this. So I believe we're moving to Massachusetts. So, racist emails sent to UMass, University of Massachusetts, Amherst black student again. So apparently there's been someone going around sending a bunch of targeted racist emails to black students in the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Basically calling them black people animals, snowflakes, that sort of thing, for, you know, fighting for equal rights. Because of course there are certain massive jerks. Let's be kind with language. Massive jerks. I don't feel like swearing as well at the moment, at the very least. Awful people, just awful people doing all this. I realize this is not a major story in some ways, but also is a story that reflects the attitudes of some of the worst of America, and the fact that, like, everyone receives if people will receive hate if you are visible enough, but the thing is, if you're in any marginalized community, there's a good chance of receiving hate even if you're nobody. Receive random hate from strangers. Like, people just trying to live their life normally will receive random hate from strangers. I know I did. I've received random hate from strangers in real life, in person. Or at the very least, I have at least once, I should say. I won't go into the McDonald's incident. It was awful. But I mean, I also was there when someone who I was previously friends with, she was very violently misgendered by a cashier at like Taco Bell or something. It was really, really awful. Here, Florida news. Here's some Florida news. I know how great Florida is. So a pansexual art teacher was fired after allowing students to draw pride flags and also making them aware of pansexuality. You know, because of Don't Say Gay type laws. So Casey Scott, first year art teacher, says school officials fired her after discussing LGBTQ issues and her pansexual identity with students. Firing her after on April 18th, just before the state's Don't Say Gay law goes into effect. So apparently this is, well, like it just said, right before the Don't Say Gay law. Scott had the students in her class draw flags the day after she came out to her own family. Some of her students are non-binary, bisexual, and gay, draw various queer flags representing their identities, which makes sense. Because, I mean, if you create a welcoming place, people will open up. When students asked about her own sexual identity, she told them that she identifies as pansexual. She also told students that they could talk to her if they ever want to discuss their own identities. And so soon after, a school administrator told her to remove the students' flags from her door. To comply with their demands, she destroyed the students' flags in front of their very eyes, which is just heartbreaking. Not once did anyone from my administration ever explain to me any topic that I was not allowed to discuss, was not to allow or discuss. Yeah, I know, Jinx, you meant intersectionality is real. I don't know how far the delay is, but yes. She also told the school district that she would never discuss her personal life and avoid similar art projects if she was reinstated as a teacher. She wasn't reinstated. So Scott wasn't a member of the Regional Teachers Union, and she was under a probationary period for new hires, during which time teachers can be let go without cause, according to Kevin Daly, president of the Teachers Union of Lee County. Yeah. Basically, I know, it's a shock. Florida, some places in Florida are very not good. If you are LGBTQ. I know this is a shock. With Ron DeSantis is still governor of Florida. So, NDY. I forget where NDY is. Oh, Massachusetts. So, There's anyways, John Kelly debates CNC's Dan Diaz on Greater Boston. So basically it was a conversation about physician-assisted suicide. Now, not to be all centrist, but I understand both sides. And the problem is, as it stands, the way culture is, the way society is, in my opinion, physician-assisted suicide is not something that can happen in such a way that's not going to be used as part of a way of pressuring disabled people who aren't seen as good enough for society. So John Kelly says that many people who have chosen physician-assisted suicide did so not because of pain, but because of the loss of abilities and feeling like a burden on others. He said those are the same issues disabled people face. My own father wished that I had died in the accident, he said, and people have told me they would rather be dead than be like me. He added that there's a lack of proper home care, which can be expensive when available. People are faced with the choice of going to nursing home or living at home with resentful helpers and not getting their needs met. And I know my girlfriend's family member has been through that sort of experience of not getting proper needs met. I know my childhood friend who has terminal cancer had gotten into assisted living type place. Was a nightmare for her to get out of, and she said it was worse than prison, which she had also been to once before. So worse than prison. And so people are faced with a choice that they shouldn't have to face. And it's essentially saying that it's giving people an option to go from doctor to doctor until they find one who's willing to assisted suicide one of those less than worthy people away. Now, this is not how it should be, and there are certain circumstances in a more ideal society where physician-assisted suicide would be beneficial, because bodily autonomy is important. People need to control. If people genuinely are like, living is too much of a hassle for me, I don't have the spoons to even deal with living, and likely said slightly less articulately than that, because if you're in a bad enough, well, maybe not less articulately, but like if you're in constant major pain that nothing's going to change, and you're a type of person who just doesn't want to deal with it, I don't think it should be a problem for assisted suicide. However, the way society is now, it suffers from way too many ways of it being exploited for ableist means, and a way of saying that disabled people should die instead of making the world, trying to make the world a better place for people. That's my opinion. I realize it seemed basically I'm technically agreeing with both, but I'm saying that disabled people are right in terms of the ability to properly utilize that due to the harshness of society. But yeah, I mean, I was looking at Not Dead Yet. I can't believe I didn't process that NDY does equal Not Dead Yet, which is a disabled run advocacy group, which is why their information, if there's a new story from them, chances are it's something important and almost guaranteed to be on here. So, Georgia. So, Georgia High School Sports Association bans trans kids from playing in school sports, because of course they do. And I realize this probably isn't the first school and to run that particular brand of anti-LGBTQ thing. It's not the first, but it's still awful that it happened. Will it require students to play on teams matching the sex listed on their birth certificate? Because birth certificates are clearly more important than, the biology stuff at the moment, which is a major problem, by the way, for women's sports. You can make an argument if you believe. The thing is, it's like they can't comprehend the idea of trans men being able to compete against men, much less even women competing against men in things. Now, at the moment, there are, depending on the sports activity, I have not necessarily always seen women be able to compete on the exact same level, but trans men have been able to compete with men just fine, and trans women have been able to compete with women just fine. So this is just something that creates so many problems, completely ignores trans men, because apparently trans men never exist in these sorts of arguments. And basically anyone who's not a cis man is considered in some way, shape, or form a harm to their idyllic version of the universe. Now, some slightly better news. Georgia mom opens a youth resource center to honor her son after he was killed. This is an example of someone potentially fighting for the fallen, to try to prevent the same thing from happening again to the people who are living. Now, I'm not super aware of youth center, so this might not be as good of a helpful thing, but if it can help, because it's already apparently secured jobs for more than 40 young people, and if you take people out of a bad situation, if you can take people out of a bad situation and improve their livelihood, I am all for it. especially in any marginalized community, whether it be a Black community, disabled community, LGBTQ community. It all deserves this sort of help. Now, speaking of people banning trans people, Tennessee, which has been an absolute nightmare, has banned trans athletes from women's college sports because, of course, they have. This is another birth certificate thing, and so the Olympic ruling assumes that testosterone affects sports, certain aspects of sports ability. Now, there are various reasons why that is potentially questionable. But so even if you assume that the Olympic committees, if you're assuming that the experts who deal with Olympic sports know what they're talking about, then this is very bad for women's sports because it'll force trans men into women's sports. And then you will have men in women's sports. This is a law to put men in women's sports. So, like, and I realize that involves not accepting trans men as existing and also calling trans women men, or I have been called on several occasions by people on Twitter, which is its own sort of creepy, dehumanizing thing that occurs on Twitter. But yeah, so Tennessee has just been spreading a slew of anti-LGBTQ laws. Although there's a worse state, Alabama. Now, I realize the Biden administration is filing suit against this, but right now doctors could go to prison for providing healthcare to trans people in Alabama. So basically it's going to prevent, this is a bill set up to try to prevent hormone blockers, to try to prevent HRT, to prevent whatever is in the best interests of a trans youth, because it's they start young. They're like, oh, people who are young don't know what they're talking about. People who are under 18 don't know what they're talking about, or whatnot. Or people under 12 don't know what they're talking about. And then they move it up to 18. People under 18 don't know what they're talking about. And then up to 25. So you're not supposed to transition until you're old. You're supposed to suffer more trauma. Specifically because they don't. Bills like these are designed to slowly but surely try to remove trans people because they violate their view on what an ideal human is, because all of this runs back to cis white guys who have a very white nationalist framework, even if they don't realize how white nationalist the framework for a lot of medical stuff is. they're playing into it. Much like the previous story was also playing into the ideal person and not wanting those lesser human beings like the trans people or black people or disabled people. And at least trans people in Alabama, there has been activism to try to change. Yes, it's all eugenics, like all of it, all the anti-trans stuff, all the all the anti-black stuff, anti-people of color, anti-disabled stuff. It's all eugenics. It's all based around a principle from the turn of the century, 1900s, or maybe late 1800s. The principle of an ideal version of how humanity should be that has and there may have been aspects of that beforehand, but that is when it really took its form. So the Knights and Orchids Society, the TKO Society, which, by the way, dope name. I love it. Based in Selma, Alabama, is basically a black, trans, and LGBT-led grassroots group trying to help communities. And this is very important. Like, creating community stuff is very important. And also TKO, Technical Knockout, to knock out those anti-trans bills. I love it. Knights and Orchid Society should do a technical knockout to knock that stuff out. I just the name, it's just so yeah, there's because of all the anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ bills in Alabama, like the stuff I mentioned, the bill I mentioned earlier. Obviously, there's stuff that happened in previous states, but I'm not going to necessarily get into that. But like, they're considering like 6 bills attacking LGBT stuff. It's just people are protesting, and you need to do what you can, give information, create communities, led by like 8 to 12 people. I know Bo the Fifth Column had a good video breaking down that form of activism, although obviously impulsiveness, the ability to just go out and do stuff, to be on call, is its own sort of it's its own privilege that obviously if you're disabled in any number of ways, that may be more difficult. But if you can try to create those and vote. Like, voting is what got these laws passed. The Republican Party has been very strong at getting their base to vote. And while the Democrats need to be, and various parties need to be pushed to make the right decision to move stuff towards a better place, there's also the harm reduction, because the Republican Party is moving us backwards and the Democratic Party is keeping us in place. So that did not look good. It's this and whatever. You get the issue. So like that, and these protests in communities need to make stuff go forward in a positive direction and genuinely help people. But to do that effectively and in a more noticeable way, you need to vote. It sucks, but the Democratic Party has no desire to move stuff backwards as much as the Republican Party. And like I said, they still will do awful stuff, but nowhere near as awful. The Republican Party at this point wants to go full eugenics, and the Democratic Party doesn't. The Democratic Party will let eugenics happen, which is a different thing to actively go for it versus passively not do anything. So Trans woman sues North Carolina. We're in North Carolina now. Trans woman sues North Carolina for putting her in a male prison in inhumane conditions. Her gender dysphoria was untreated, sexually assaulted, and put on suicide watch. Denied gender affirming care, which in itself is, in my mind, a hate crime. To do this, and that includes the stuff going on in Alabama, because you're actively trying to harm a community against, what is currently known by the majority of scientists and psychologists. So it violates the ADA. The lack of gender affirming care violates the ADA, and is trying to use the ADA to pass that law. And I believe I've spoken with you outside of stream, Jinx Tiamat, and I believe you've mentioned ideas related to that. Not necessarily, if not for gender affirming care, possibly for stuff relating to bathroom mills. It's just denial of treatment is not only discriminatory, it's inhumane, which is true. Like I said, I would basically call it a hate crime. By refusing to treat her gender dysphoria, the prison system or whatever subjects the person to needless suffering and places her life at risk. Trans people placed in carceral institutions statistically face higher degrees of violence. Hey, Joe Biden's diaper. Interesting name. My concern sense goes up with because I never know, especially talking politics, whether or not there will be I will get more annoying people. But the lawsuit points out the DPS was aware from the beginning the prison that she had gender dysphoria placed her nonetheless in a male facility. Being a trans woman in a male facility, obviously that creates its own risk and rape, assault, all that bad stuff. And so on some semi-good news, the Louisiana's Don't Say Gay bill which was already creating problems in Florida even before it went into place. Prison is notoriously bad at medical care. Yes, that's true. Is even more extreme than the one passed in Florida, has died in the committee. The House Education Committee Tuesday voted 7-4 to not advance the bill. Yeah, they're saying it's needed because of some sort of manufactured LGBTQ agenda, instead of people just becoming more aware of the real world. So they don't feel alone. And that's definitely not wanted if you're considered an aberration. Go away. So now we're in Michigan. So proposed Michigan voting restrictions opposed by disability groups. So putting your ballots out if you have a disability is more difficult. I mean, things are made more difficult to try to get cishet white people are the people that are cared about most in terms of ability to vote. Disabled people, black people, people of color are not considered important for a lot of voting rights. So absentee ballots, very good. So the two bills making the way Michigan legislature that put more requirements in place to get an absentee ballot, which would disproportionately affect disabled voters. Which is true. When you put too many requirements for voting, it's going to affect a number of communities. Your ability to get those requirements is always going to be a factor for any voting law. So it's voting law. So, if you're disabled, if you're black, if you're poor, those people are all harmed by this sort of legislation. Obviously, Republican is chief sponsor of the proposal. And it might be largely targeted towards black people, but it also affects disabled people in this case. It just anything to make it worse is just going to be bad, and I hope these things can I hope these things fail in terms of legislation. So here we are to the territories of America. So residents in Guam and America Samoa won't be eligible for Social Security insurance payments unless Congress chooses to act. Because if you're disabled and in a U.S. territory, apparently you don't matter, according to the U.S. government. So, if you happen to be disabled or you become disabled, because a lot of people start out not disabled, but over a long enough period of time, they become disabled. That's generally how that works. So the U.S. Supreme Court overwhelmingly affirmed, because of course the Supreme Court did, residents of Puerto Rico are not entitled to disability benefits because they live in a U.S. territory and do not pay the same federal taxes as people who live in the U.S. states. And this is a problem all throughout the territories. Basically, it's just awful. So, restricted land ownership, one estimate program could cost money for Puerto Rico residents, blah blah blah. Basically, this needs to happen. Social Security income needs to be extended. Things need to be set up so that disabled people can live a better life, or live in some cases, since various disabled people are not easily given the resources necessary. And even Social Security income, by the way, is way too low. I think my friend with terminal cancer, she sends Social Security income because, the terminal cancer. I think she got like $1,000 a month to survive on, which is not a lot, and there are limits to how much money she can have. So finally, in Minneapolis, right across the river from me, it's very not far, judge accepts Derek Chauvin's plea deal in George Floyd civil rights trial. Because of course, not only has the Minneapolis police not been reformed to any significant degree, Chauvin's got a plea deal to lessen his sentence, because clearly his sentence was too harsh for murder. This is totally like, I hate this. I hate this. I hate this so much. Under the plea deal, Chauvin will be sentenced to 20 to 25 years in prison, and as opposed to life in prison. And admittedly, we can talk about the ways the prison system need to be changed to try to make things better, not punish people, but like the whole reasoning for, it's just really upsetting that police officers can get a lesser sentence for murder. The term will serve concurrently with Chauvin's 270-month murder conviction on the state level. The ex-officer, who's now appealing the murder conviction, has waived the right to contest the federal conviction. Chauvin expects to serve around 17 to 21 years behind bars, assuming all good time credit. The two officers who were present during Floyd's death had been found guilty of collaboration or whatnot, or basically they're scheduled to go to trial next month for aiding and abetting in George Floyd's murder. So now, more general news. reproductive justice for disabled women, ending systemic discrimination. Now, I mean, the thing is, if you don't know, disabled women sometimes they get pressured by doctors to try to sterilize them because, you know, don't want those disabled people to have kids. It doesn't matter if it's a genetic situation. Like, even if the disability is not passed on, it's not something that would be passed on to children, doctors will still make arguments for sterilization. So, and obviously, that it's that darned eugenics that's way too prevalent. I'm just gonna say it's way too prevalent, both just throughout cultures. Eugenics is way too prevalent, which always requires a presupposition that there's an ideal version of what it means to be human. And I reject that notion, wholeheartedly reject it. There's no such thing as an ideal human. And yeah, racism, anti-blackness, and misogynoir affect disabled people of color. Oh yeah, no, I'm sure. Looking into this, I'm sure. Disabled black people, especially. Yeah, you mean forced sterilization is bad, even without their knowledge, let alone consent? Yeah. Yes. And yes, they have tried to sterilize black people. There have been I forgot the law. There have been, I know there have been laws to try to get rid of it. There was like an extra push for abortion in black communities, which is why it's understandable when black communities or people of color get worried about heavy promotion of abortion. Now, I think abortion overall is a good thing because bodily autonomy, but like, I understand the concern. And yeah, as a multi-issue thinking, so there's several key issues it's saying. Accessible facilities and resources. Health facilities don't all have universal access. Accessible transportation to get to and from an abortion clinic and reproductive care in general. Access to abortion services, access to contraception, access to preventative screenings, access to maternal health services. And yeah, here we go. Forced sterilization, inextricably linked to the eugenics movement based on ableist and racist ideologies about who should be allowed to have children. 1927, Buck versus Bell. If you're not aware of it, U.S. Supreme Court upheld the forced sterilization of disabled people and people with perceived disabilities. The decision and other racialized policies in the United States were later used at the Nuremberg trials by Nazi defendants to justify eugenics and forced sterilization. And apparently it's not explicitly been overturned, which means with the way the Supreme Court is going, it's very concerning that they might go back to Buck versus Bell. I think one of the later articles talks about that. Allowing for contraceptives would be huge if they really cared about quote-unquote baby. Yeah. Contraceptives are incredibly important, and they might go after contraceptives with the new the current Supreme Court is awful. But yeah, one study using data at risk of unintended pregnancy found 41% of Black disabled women use sterilization as a contraceptive method compared to 28% of white disabled women. The U.S. the ICE detention centers became a focal point of immigrant women's reproductive rights over the several years, with ongoing formal investigations into hysterectomies. I forgot about that. Thank you for bringing it up, article. Yes, the ICE has done I don't know if they've actually even gotten in trouble for it, but if any, but the forced hysterectomies and on Hispanic women, which is more eugenics here, eugenics there, eugenics everywhere. But yeah, and then there's guardianship, which is also affected. Sexual violence. Yeah, there we go. So women with disabilities are 40% more likely to experience intimate partner violence than non-disabled women. I feel like I could swear one of the articles I had mentioned something about the incredibly high sexual assault rate against disabled women. And now on to the Supreme Court and their awful plan to strike down abortion rights. And obviously this will affect people of color. RIP is huge in nursing homes too, so sterilization is a way to limit evidence. Yep. Yeah. So, women of color living in restrictive states have limited access to health care and lack of choices for effective birth control and anti-abortion stuff. I know abortion clinics in a lot of places are very out of the way of the general public for reasons to try to prevent some of it is to try to prevent women from being able to get abortions, but yeah, so Mississippi aimed to revive 15-week abortion ban blocked by lower courts. Low-income people are always disproportionately affected by abortion bans, and Black and brown people are more likely to be low-income, Roberts said at the time, according to Newsweek. When you factor that Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the United States, and that many Black people in the state of Mississippi live in the Mississippi Delta, which is the poorest area in the poorest state, you're talking about barriers upon barriers already, just in terms of money. And then on top of that, there's I need to go cross-country trip to get my abortion. That'll take me 3 to 4 days. Yeah, that is very... That's not a realistic option. We hope that Roe and Casey... Alito was saying that Roe and Casey must be overruled, because of course Alito is like that. But yeah, the Supreme Court decision also weakens disability rights. So apparently the High Court ruled last month 6-3 against Jane Cummings, who is deaf and legally blind, determining that emotional distress from discrimination is insufficient harm to warrant a lawsuit under federal civil rights laws. Discriminated against her on the basis of disability, violating the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Affordable Care Act, which apply to facilities that receive federal funds. The only injuries were humiliation and frustration, apparently, according to the judges, which is its own BS. In dissent, justice, discrimination often harms in ways that are purely emotional. And the ruling will effectively weaken the protections of people under the Rehabilitation Act and Affordable Care Act. Nearly 50 years since the passage of the Rehabilitation Act, too many people with disabilities continue to face isolation and humiliation as a result of discrimination. By limiting their ability to seek and obtain money damages for the emotional distress they experience when their rights are violated, in many cases the only cognizable harms such plaintiffs experience, today's decision has significantly limited their access to justice. That said, on top of that, the Supreme Court taking down Roe v. Wade also has potential to undo a lot of this on top of this. I mean, it's just stripping away of rights is what the Republican Party is doing at the moment. Oh yeah, leaked decision to overturn abortion rights shows that marriage equality and sodomy laws are next. Because of course. Now, the reason sodomy laws were protected in let's stick with this one. With the Roe v. Wade case was it was privacy was the right to privacy was the reason why it was legal to have sex with whatever consenting adult you wanted to. And so Alito wrote that Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Referring to the 1972 Supreme Court decision that said that there is a constitutional right to an abortion while a fetus is non-viable. Roe's overturned, each state will decide whether to ban abortion or not, meaning that people who need abortions in many states will have to go to illegal providers or get them to get them or leave their states, because of course it's otherwise women can have power. They don't want that. The same right was later used in Lawrence v. Texas. The 2003 Supreme Court, by the way, 2003, I graduated high school in 2003, decision that ended sodomy laws, which were state laws that banned homosexuality. And Obergefell versus Hodge, the 2015 decision, that legalized marriage equality in all 50 states. So, like, there are aspects of that, the due process clause of the 14th Amendment, and if you're, and that was what was in the Roe v. Wade case. So, like, the fact that privacy, protection for privacy, this will only decrease safe abortions, not abortion as a whole. Yeah, it will decrease abortion as a whole, but not by a lot. Most of it is going to be less safe abortion, and this is going to create more death. This is going to create death, harm, and pain, and the stripping of rights. This is going to be awful. Attempts to justify abortion through appeals to broader right to autonomy and to define one's concept of existence, and said that allowing the right to make personal decisions could license fundamental rights to illicit drug use, prostitution, like. So basically, what the judge is saying is that bodily autonomy should not be a right. This person is saying that bodily autonomy, the main thing behind consent, the main concept behind consent, is being argued against as a human right. This is attacking so many fundamental. This is attacking so many rights that it's scary and upsetting, and because bodily autonomy is the important foundation for consent. So if you're saying people shouldn't have bodily autonomy, you can potentially make laws that make it okay for rape to occur. Like, this is attacking human rights on such a fundamental level that it is disgusting. This is absolutely disgusting and wrong. The reasoning behind this is just... Yeah, you specifically mentioned Northern Lights as examples of some faulty reasoning behind Roe. Yeah, it's everything about this is wrong. It's trying to take away women's right to abortion, women's rights to speak out. If a heterosexual woman has a husband who rapes her, it's taking away that, because stripping away bodily autonomy is, and right to describe yourself, it's taking away, it's an attack on trans rights, it's an attack on gay rights, it's an attack on women, and it's attack on race, because as mentioned in the previous news story today, all the racist sentiment against black people having their hair naturally grow, that's being attacked by this, because this is an attack on bodily autonomy. This is a absolute white nationalist position that's trying to create, that's based around some sort of nihilistic Ubermensch type BS. And I hate it. I hate it in so many ways. And yes, abortion rights are at real risk in all of these states. I live in Minnesota, the weird state, lesser Canada. Well, I'll get into Canada. Canada has its own problems. But yeah, this is just... Yeah. So, Karine Jean-Pierre, to be the first black LGBTQ plus White House press secretary. I don't know why I said her name all French. I think it's because of the Jean-Pierre thing. I don't know how she pronounces it. I'm probably slaughtering it. But yes, who has been, she has done so much, so much judicial work, more than many of the people currently on the Supreme Court. So, I am happy. I don't know how much of a difference this will make, but I hope it'll help to some degree. Don't know if it will, but Black, lesbian, LGBTQ plus advocate, I am all on board to try to have them on the Supreme Court. She understands a lot of this stuff better than me. Because listening to marginalized groups is kind of one of the important things, and trying to understand that, and trying to make stuff better for marginalized groups generally makes stuff better for everyone. It's just we have such a hierarchical structure that you're supposed to be good enough to live or whatnot. Trying to create an ideal human. It all eventually goes back to trying to have an ideal human, and yeah. That was specifically Oklahoma. I should have had this earlier. But an Oklahoma judge rules lawsuit seeking reparations for the Tulsa Race Massacre can move forward. Which, that's just 300 black residents of Tulsa were killed in 1921 terrorist attack, which also saw a violent white mob destroying places of business and homes in the Greenwood area of the city known as Black Wall Street. Basically, a bunch of white racists murdered tons of people and to try to harm black people who were living too good of a life for them to be able to stand. At the time of this writing, it wasn't clear what would happen next in the suit. Per separate report from Reuters, the suit seeks financial and other reparations. And 1921, there are plenty of people whose parents went through this. Like 1921 seems like a long time ago, but it's not actually as long ago as you think. And I hope this goes forward. I really do. Anything that can help even a little is a good thing. So, the Education Department to update Section 504 on protecting children with disabilities. So, the U.S. Department of Education will update the Section 504. Section 504 was the thing that didn't get really enacted properly, and that's why there was the protests in the various capitals. Like, Section 504 was written and never signed, and there's another thing. I don't remember. My memory is bad on disability rights, apparently, at the moment. But Section 504 is a major aspect of disability rights. So, the department this month will begin collecting public comments on what's known as Section 504. It's time to make regulations current in response to experience of students' families. So, special education experts say there's a wide variation in how school districts accommodate students' needs in the classrooms, and that parents often in the dark about their children's rights under 504. Also, way too much segregation. Disabled people shouldn't be segregated from schools. Being disabled should be normalized because everyone, if you're not disabled now, there's a decent chance at some point in your life you will become disabled, just as time moves on. I was hit by a car and received a traumatic brain injury. As a pedestrian, I was hit by a car, and my face went right into the hood. Apparently, yes, 504 of the Rehab Act. So, Unified School District. Yeah, so services that roughly 66,000 students with disabilities missed during remote learning. Students were denied services and make sure, but yeah, it's about time that happens. The best thing that could happen would be that the word handicapped would be removed, she said. It wasn't until 2010. Rosa laws, yeah, that's terminology, which is nice. It's a nice act, but it's a very oh, look at this wonderful thing I did, but I'm not actually helping you live. It is a nice thing. It is helpful. It's not nothing, but like there's been so much superficial action when it comes to legislative processes and disability rights. That's just so yeah, so currently districts aren't required to involve parents in designating accommodations, and that schools don't receive additional funding for a child served under the program as they do for special education. So far too often, individuals with dyslexia are denied access to the accommodations and educational services they are entitled to. Strengthening rights is absolutely critical to addressing barriers and accessing opportunities to those with dyslexia. And yeah, it could be 2023 before new regulations released. So like, it sounds like they're gonna update things, and it's gonna be a minor thing, but I don't know how much this is going to affect, because I'm assuming there's still not going to be any direct enforcement. So I assume you still need to go through, because so I'm not sure if this is actually going to do that much. I mean, not nothing, but it's very much going to be most useful if you're a white middle class person who has access to lawyers. It sounds like, looking over this, but I could be wrong. But given how little is fought for with disability rights, I'm skeptical. So, Black Muslims radiate their elegance on Twitter to celebrate Eid. It's I'm probably butchering the holiday. I don't speak it, but it's just, you know, it's good for Black Muslim women to people being out there and living their life. and increasing visibility is helpful for people to understand that people are not the stereotype that they've categorized them into. Josie Turner Smith agrees, anytime a black woman is enjoying herself, it is something to be celebrated. This isn't an important article at all. I just agree. So Turner Smith said, I think anytime a black woman is enjoying herself is something to be celebrated, is saying like the norm, and whatever the status quo is, I'm allowed to be happy and I'm going to be happy. Like, I would even extend this to anyone in marginalized groups. If they're happy, it should be celebrated. Like, people, there's enough barriers that there's a good thing to be celebrated. And finally, Black, transgender, and LGBTQ plus youth among the highest rates of suicide attempts. Survey connected, approximately 45% of respondents were people of color and 48% were trans and non-binary. Research has discussed 45% had considered suicide. More than half of all trans and non-binary participants experience suicidal thoughts, and this is all because of society as is. But like, this is why intersectionality is important. Ideally, if we can drop suicide, self-harm, other stuff like that, that's good. And hopefully, well, I mean, this is a stopgap type thing. 20 US states launching refuge bills to protect trans kids from Republican attacks. So 20 lawmakers in 20 states are going offense against anti-trans legislation by bringing forward bills to give refuge to trans youth and their families. I know there's currently disabled protest for affordable housing at HED right now. Yes. Go to the gracedowrights.com, free our people. So right now, yeah, there's a home and community thing. Go check out Greystone Rights if you're looking into any disability advocacy. It's just good. Don't apologize, Jenks Diamant. This is like a news show. We're talking about news, and you're bringing up actual advocacy. That is nothing to apologize for. But yeah, there's various legislation to try to basically make it so people can, current action is behind walls. Yes. So yes, there are anti-LGBT laws, and there are various laws currently being passed to try to prohibit California officials from complying with out-of-state subpoenas related to trans healthcare bans, seeking medical or related information about individuals who travel to California for gender-affirming treatment. Basically, there are laws that are being passed to try to make it so you can go to another state to get help. That being said, poverty, all this stuff, it's like most people who are poor and living in Texas are not going to be able to travel like a state or two to get gender affirming care. But it is still good that's happening because it will still help a few people. So in Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK, this is in the UK, I forgot this is in the UK. Slightly out of order. It's fine. So, no, I'm gonna move this. I'm gonna move this over to the UK. So, American women can come to Canada if they need an abortion, minister says. Yeah, that's not realistic. That's kind of a dick move. I don't see why we would not. If people come here and need access, certainly, that's a service that would be provided. Like, for one, it's hard to get into Canada than it used to be. That's one. Two, you need to fly over to Canada? Most people need to fly over to Canada. And most people are not going to be able to fly over to Canada to get an abortion. This is something that's just helpful for rich white people. It's just... It's a silly statement and kind of a punch in the gut. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Canada, so the Canadian Centre of Caregiving Excellence launches this Thursday. This is exciting news for parents, children with disability. Yeah, see, I don't know enough about this. Canada leading the way in quality care where caregiving is valued. So, person says, I've been working in the disability support field for most of my career, and I've also been a caregiver over the course of my life. I was born into a caregiving role as a carer to my grandmother with Alzheimer's, who lived with us till I was 8. She then moved to a small long-term home. She was a really important person in my life. I also care about aging. I also care for an aging dad, and saw my mother through blah blah blah. Caregiver stuff. Blah blah blah. Caregiver stuff. Whether it's about disability or so milligrams. There's a specific advocacy piece to this because caregiving has been fragmented by region, province, and territory. There are also silos on the way we fund care, whether in healthcare system, yes, which is a problem. I thought there was more to this story because of the headline. I made that mistake. People who need care are devalued, which is true. But I thought there'd be one more about that. See, that's caregiving roles devalued. Like, is this not about? Is this not about disabled people? Is this just about the care? Okay, well, the disability community during the pandemic, mutual aid coming help and support each other. I think it's vital where it needs to be nurtured and encouraged, but I think there's more systemic role for support. When you go to a medical appointment with a loved one or a friend who's accessing care, at what point does that medical professional check in on the caregiver? Okay, yeah, so this is... I should have looked into this one more, just because this is like, caregivers are important, and yes, they do play an important role in disability rights, and caregivers should be given better compensation and all that stuff. But I thought I was mistaken from the title to think that it was talking about how disabled people are devalued, not the caregivers. Apparently there's also violence at Ontario's oldest institution for disabled children, which is exposed in a documentary. This is the thing. A film with shocking violence against Ontario children and adults with intellectual disabilities. Toronto filmmaker learned as an adult that she had two half-brothers who she never knew existed. They were sent to Huronia as toddlers in the late 1940s and 50s and died there. And trying to piece together their lives, she uncovers the horrors of Ontario's oldest government-run institution for disabled children, which closed in 2009. So it's good that it closed. It's good that it's no longer, this place is no longer there, but toddlers spent their days in cage cribs. Children were drugged to keep them compliant. And by the way, this place was, it's a lawsuit in 2013 and closed in 2009. Children were thrown downstairs. Hashtag affordable, accessible, integrated housing. Yes. They had their bones broken, they were burned, they were lowered upside down into buckets of cold water, they're bound in restraints, beaten on their feet, and left in isolation. A girl who stole candy was put in a straitjacket and dumped in the basement for 2 days with no food and water. She broke her collarbone trying to get out of the jacket. Toilets and showers were in open rooms. Staff allegedly abused children as they showered and sexually assaulted them in their beds. Hundreds of involuntary sterilizations were performed on patients, as well as medical experiments. The cemetery at Huronia holds about 2,000 bodies. Some 1,400 lie in unmarked graves. So, and this is not... This is the sort of thing that some people don't care about what happens to disabled people. It's a real problem, and yes, and eugenics as well. Nobody listened to families. I would tell my parents, but who would believe me? Didn't allow parents to walk through the institution. Not everyone was allowed to go to school. It's just... It was bad. This all bad. This all... Wow, I can't words. This all was bad. So it's Unloved, Huronia's Forgotten Children is the film about it. It's probably worth checking out. whitepinepictures.com, documentary Unloved. But it's amazing what horrible things people are willing to do in the name of trying to create some sort of Ubermensch. So, a Bosnian MP who said LGBTQ plus people should be kept away from children found guilty of hate speech. So, for the first time in Bosnia and Herzegovina's history, a court has determined discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Good that closed, but safety net is needed for those who are here, plus those who survived and did not. Yes. That is very true. So after the announcement of the first ever Sarajevo Pride March in 2019, I apologize if I slaughter these names, which I probably do. Hadžiderević issued a Facebook statement that went viral, claiming that the event was aimed at destroying the state and its people. That's a very white nationalist talking point, but yeah. Everyone has the right to live their lives as they like, but we also have the right to choose who we want to live with. So, like, here's the problem with that statement. It's one of those statements which sounds fine, except when you're pushing people out of their homes versus, you can move to a different place, but pushing people out of their home through government action or making their lives worse is different. That's not choosing who you want to live with, it's choosing who you want to allow to exist, which is different. I want people like these to be isolated and put away from our children and society. Let them go somewhere else and make a city, a state, and a law for themselves and their own rights that no one will dispute, but not here. Yeah, the court ruled that I apologize. Hadžiderevic's words were discriminatory and also said they constitute hate speech according to Radio Free Europe/Radio Liberty. The former MP was found to have hurt the right to equal treatment of members of the LGBTIQ community on the basis of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and sexual characteristics. She's been banned from repeating her statement and will have to cover court costs. So it's good to some degree that there are aspects of society that are moving towards a kinder place. So U.S. State Department says Russia wrongfully detained lesbian basketballer Brittany Griner. So Griner has been in Russian jail for nearly 76 days now. U.S. is finally speaking in her defense because of Russians. So Russian authorities at Sheremetyevo airport near Moscow arrested Griner on February 17th, a week before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, accusing her of large-scale transportation of drugs. The authorities allegedly found cannabis oil vape cartridges in her luggage. The charge carries a possible 5 to 10 year prison sentence. So to make extra money, Griner and many other WNBA players compete in Russia during off-league season. Griner has played for the Russian team UMMC Ekaterinburg for several years. Observers worry that Russia might be holding her hostage in order to use her political leverage. Russia recently released Trevor Reed, a U.S. citizen accused of assaulting Russian police officers in a prison exchange with the U.S. last week, offering reason to be optimistic about Griner's possible release. But yeah, this is largely stemmed in homophobia and other stuff. So, trans Ukrainians being forced back into the closet as cruel despot Putin's bloodthirsty war rages on. So, many trans people in Ukraine are stopping their hormone treatments in a desperate bid to stay safe from transphobic violence. So, a lot of people talk about detransitioners. This is what detransitioning usually is, and why that usually happens. Stopping hormones to try not to die. And which is its own. It's awful that they have to go through this. They're afraid of facing violence for being visibly trans. So basically, not wanting to die from Russian soldiers because there are anti-LGBTQ laws in Russia. Not wanting to die. Or face violence and rape. Worryingly, the aggression some are facing isn't even coming from Russian forces, although that's significant. Instead, they're facing aggression from members of Ukraine's territorial defense forces. Oh, the country's military reserve, of course. That's also a factor. Keeping yourself safe is always valid and important. Yes, Jinx Tiamat, that is true. Aggression towards queer people can be based on appearances. So, example, men who are looking and behaving in a feminine way, or women behaving in a masculine way, they would experience aggression due to that. So, yeah. This is awful, and I hope they can stay safe. So, in Nigeria, queer Nigerians stage defiant protest as government tries to ban cross-dressing. By the way, they look amazing. This is the best. So, around 50 LGBT plus activists took to the streets of Abuja, Nigeria, to protest a reviled bill that would make cross-dressing illegal. The bill, which seeks to amend a 2013 act banning same-sex marriage, would result in queer people who dress outside the expected gender norms to be imprisoned for 6 months or slapped with a hefty fine. So, yeah, and there are LGBT plus Nigerians who could lose their jobs and homes if cross-dressing bill is passed. So I want this to help. I'm worried that it won't, but I mean, with a lot of LGBTQ stuff, it's very do or die when it comes to protests. So I am glad people in Nigeria are there's a LGBT plus community in Nigeria who are willing and able to stand up for their rights. Oh, and people getting death threats for it. Nigeria's anti-LGBT plus laws are rooted in colonialism. That might be true. A cross-dressing bill, if passed, would make it an already legally complicated situation even worse if Nigeria's embattled LGBT plus community. Homosexuality is illegal in Nigeria, and queer people have no legal protection against discrimination. In 2013, Nigeria's parliament formally passed same-sex marriage and introduced criminal penalties to those who marry somebody of the same sex. Oh, okay. It's formally banned same-sex marriage. Sorry. As is the case in many African countries, Nigeria's ban on homosexuality originated as a colonial-era law imposed under British rule. Because, of course, the Brits managed to do this stuff in a lot of countries and then wonder why it stuck. Homophobia, Africa's moral blind spot. It's high time for African leaders to accept LGBTQ rights are human rights, which relates to the previous story. I don't know. That should be fine. So on April 17th, I apologize for slaughtering this. Sheila Adhiambo Lumumba, a 25-year-old non-binary lesbian, was found murdered in Karatina, Kenya. Lumumba had been missing for several days before their body was found. An autopsy report revealed that Lumumba was raped, strangled, stabbed several times in the neck and eyes, and legs broken. Human rights groups lamented Lumumba's ultimately and violent passing. Sadly, it is true that gruesome murder is not an anomaly. In Kenya, gay sex is a criminal offense, which is still holdover from British laws imposed. Evangelical conservatives also exported anti-queer BS too? Yes. In fact, evangelical conservatives are part of the reason for the strong anti-LGBTQ, well, specifically anti-trans, but also ultimately anti-LGBTQ and anti-feminist movement in Britain. It is funded by and heavily supported by evangelical conservatives. So apparently in Kenya it's punishable by 14 years in jail. Kenya's president, for instance, dismissed LGBTQ rights as a non-issue. Kenya does not consider homosexuality a human right. This is not an issue, as you would want to put it, of human rights. This is an issue of society from of our own base, as a culture, as a people, regardless of which community you come from. This is yeah, so apparently there are various places in Kenya with anti-LGBTQ stuff. In Ghana, security forces raided an LGBTQ rights group. South Africa is the outlier on the continent, as LGBTQ rights are enshrined in its constitution. Nevertheless, violence against queer people is still rife in the country. Between February 2021 and April 2022, for example, at least 20 LGBTQ individuals were murdered in ghastly circumstances because of their gender identity or sexual orientation. Homophobia, as well as vigilant protest against LGBTQ individuals, is rife in Vladimir Putin's Russia, obviously. Which Oh, homophobia is rooted in eugenics and is traditional and fueled by fascist and authoritarian regimes. Like Vladimir Putin, who runs an authoritarian regime. African progressives and human rights advocates should learn from ongoing attacks on LGBTQ rights across the world and see that things will not change for the better on the continent without immediate action. Yeah, I think they know that. LGBTQ repression, yeah, it's bad. It's still bad. So there's anger at the Greek court's verdict over LGBTQ activist killing because LGBTQ activists denounced acquittal of police officers who had been charged over killing of a queer activist in Athens, Greece. So the two men, Spiridon Dimopoulos and Athanasios Shortarias, were found guilty of fatal bodily harm and sentenced to 10 years in prison. 4 police officers who had been charged with fatal bodily harm were acquitted on all charges. This trial signals the ease with which the system denies our lives and their value. Zach breaking taboos and speaking up about HIV positive and other stuff. So on the afternoon of September 21st, 2018, Kostopoulos was, for reasons that may remain unclear, became locked in a jewelry store in central Athens. Video of the incident shows him panicking, attempting to exit through a broken window, while 2 men, the jewelry store owner and a local real estate agent, kick him repeatedly as bystanders look on. Several police officers arrive at the scene, handcuffed the bloody Kostopoulos, and continue to kick him. Kostopoulos died in an ambulance soon after. So this is not just... I mean, this is a killing, but this is also... That's gotta be like, that's gotta be like 3rd degree murder. Yeah, it's just... I mean, Greek laws are different. It's definitely to cause harm, and they caused a death of it. So that while that's going on in Greece, the Taliban orders women in Afghanistan to be covered from head to toe while in public. Now, how people want to dress is their business. If people want to dress that way, cool. But when a government forces it upon its citizens, that's another story. So a new decree says women should only leave the house when necessary, and that dress code violations may lead to male relatives facing jail time. Yeah, this decision contradicts numerous assurances regarding respect for and protection of all Afghan human rights, including those of women and girls, that have been provided to the international community by Taliban representatives during discussions and negotiations over the past decade. I know this is a shock. Those women who are not too old or young must cover their face except their eyes. But yeah, so just to be clear, women can wear this. Women can dress however they want. Men can dress however they want. It's bodily autonomy. Everyone can dress however they want. But when it's forced upon you, that is the stripping of bodily autonomy. And I don't see the difference between something like this and some of the statements that Judge Alito made. Immediately going back from a U.S. perspective to the Supreme Court decision. So, this is an interesting thing. I don't like the wording of it. The wording of it is they're saying that high-tech... Basically, there's a high-tech bracelet that could be helpful for computer use with the wrist. Because they are related. Yeah, those issues are related. But yeah, so this is... So this is, and like I said, I hate the wording. So there's 17 million worldwide people living with cerebral palsy. And 2/3 of people affected with cerebral palsy find it difficult to move one or both arms, and 50% find speech difficult or impossible, according to provided by the Cerebral Palsy Alliance, which is its own questionable thing. If I recall correctly, that's the questionable organization. Correct me if I'm wrong. Jinx, Tiamat, because you know more about cerebral palsy related stuff. So this person can only use one finger to type on a keyboard, which is slow and inefficient. So 2 years ago, the team of engineers at the University of Sydney School for Computer Science came up with an idea to change the life of people with CP. And to use cheap and accessible technology. And this is one of those things where making the world more accessible in general is probably beneficial for everyone. But anyways, the sensor picks up the tiniest movements and vibrations made by the carpal tunnel, the part of the wrist that contains the tendons that control the hand. When fingers are moved, the vibrations they create are transmitted by Bluetooth, the computer program, and individual specific movement patterns are then instantaneously interpreted by machine learning. So like, while this looks interesting, CP Alliance is better than the United Cerebral Palsy, but meh. Okay. So this is interesting, but I don't know. Everyone can do this. If you touch your carpal tunnel like that and move your fingers a little bit, you'll see. So like, the product's being trialed, and the biggest concern I immediately have a concern with this. There needs to be programming for this to work, and it might be helpful and give more movement options. Like if you can only this might, smaller movement options might do more stuff with this device. My biggest concern is spasms. Because I'm not sure this device would work well. It can be programmed to ignore it when a spasm occurs in terms of usage, because there might be a way to find a difference between spasm movement and non-spasm movement. I just don't know if they will do that. I don't know if they will do that. But it is potentially interesting. This is one of those things where accommodating technology is more helpful than it is about accommodations and not trying to cure people, which is two different frameworks. That being said, I absolutely hate the framing of this. So this is something that happens in India. They use especially able to. Most people who have CPU-related hand issues have particular carpal tunnel issues, or heavy side eye. Oh, heavy side eye in terms of the ability of this to work and be beneficial. That might, that's a good criticism. We'll see. I don't know enough about the I don't know if maybe they'll notice that and improve, or because it is being tested with people with cerebral palsy, so it might of things related to their implementation issues, but Indigo barred, I'm just going to say, disabled children from boarding a flight to the Ranchi airport as he was in quote unquote a state of panic. Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia said on Monday that no human being should have to go through this, and he himself is investigating the incident. As the boy was prohibited from boarding the airline Ranchi Hyderabad's flight on Saturday, his parents, who were with him, also decided not to enter the plane. Director of Civil Aviation prohibiting the incident will take appropriate action. He seemed ready, except for some big displays of general teenage assertiveness. Then we witnessed the full display of brute authority and power. The Indigo Interglobe Aviation Limited staff declared that the child would not be allowed to take the flight because he was at risk to other passengers, she mentioned. I think you imagine also something on lines of behavior such as this and that of drunk passengers deemed them unfit to travel. The other passengers opposed him resolutely and demanded that the child and his parents board the flight as soon as possible. She mentioned several challenged the Indigo staff to collaborate his decision with corresponding statements in the rule book, she said. They held up their mobile phones with news articles and Twitter posts on Supreme Court judgments on how no airline could discriminate against passengers with disabilities. There was a delegation of doctors that was taking the same flight. They offered full support of the child and parents if any health episode were to occur midair. However, Indigo staff did not change their decision of barring the child from the flight. When asked about the incident, Indigo had on Sunday said, in view of the safety of passengers, I'm just gonna change the wording, a disabled child could not board the flight with his family on May 7th as he was in a state of panic. Basically, this is a lot of if you're too different, your rights can be easily stripped like this. Gay K-pop singer Holland punched in homophobic attack. This is obviously hate crime. Singer Holland, known as the first openly gay K-pop musician, was left bloodied after following a homophobic attack. Now, Korea, to my knowledge, does not allow gay marriage. I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, they don't have the best rights. So, Holland being a K-pop star is a good thing to promote the LGBTQ community. The fact that my sexuality as gay is public should never expose myself to this kind of violence, nor any other LGBT plus and all elders, women, and minorities in this world. That is happening in 2022 shows the sad reality of LGBT plus human rights. Holland said they reported the incident to the police and hoped his case would be looked after properly. This should never happen to anyone in this world, no matter who you are. I wish the world was filled more with love and hope rather than hate and violence. So I hope the singer is doing well, or doing better, recovering, all that. Here's the story. This is technically an older story, but as you can see, it's from April 27th, but it's interesting. So there's a Japanese artist who uses her amputated legs to question what is a correct body. So this is someone, as an artist, there's a disabled woman fighting against the notion of humans having to be a particular way to count. Her legs were amputated from a congenital limb disease, and she basically does artwork like this, where it's just about, well, there are all these ways in which, you know, there are various ways in which people can be different. And would someone who existed like this, for instance, would they count as human? Would you see them as an aberration? And it's very much what this exhibition seems to be very much about this cause. Now, I think when people see art, they tend to ignore the overall social statement, or even if they understand it, they only understand it on a very superficial level and don't actually apply that. I am just happy that someone is expressing themselves in such a way that also makes a statement to try to better people's lives. In Northern Ireland, I can't pronounce this person's name. I've heard this person's name spoken by an Irish person, and I am forever, Zanzi specifically, Zanzi talked about this election. I cannot pronounce this person's name. It's I don't know, Sean Fenn or something. And I probably slaughtered it. I don't know how to pronounce this person's name, but this this party is a party for this is the most left-wing party in Northern Ireland. It's a nationalist party, which means something completely different in Northern Ireland than it does here. Well, I mean, nationalist in Northern Ireland is a bit like some of the aspects of the Black Nationalist Party. It's part of the thing of Irish history is using the idea of nationalism to bring people together and fight for something that's better for the people. Whereas what is the DUP? Is that the Democratic Unionist Party? Something like that. Has done everything in its power to stop LGBTQIA plus stuff, and I think I believe they fought against abortion in Northern Ireland as well. Yeah, they're basically the conservative party. So basically, it's an LGBTQ plus supporting party, and I don't know how effective it will be. There's a lot of unknown and maybes, but them getting into power on a left-wing platform says something. So, the Disabled People's Organizations, the DPOs, so they're trying to deal with disability poverty in Glasgow. So basically, 57% of the disabled people in the city are worried about money. 47% were worried about access to food. The major problem in a lot of disabled people are suffering issues in UK, Glasgow included. So I'm not wanting the earth. I just want to be seen as human. To be honest, the way I've been treated, had I been an animal, I would have been taken away from the owner. Basically, disabled people are seen as less than animals, even, which I don't necessarily disagree with sometimes. Like, people are so cruel. There's so many obstructions put in your path just to get what you're entitled to. I want somewhere I can live that allows me to be able to get to some places like a library or a shop. Disabled people aren't looking for the earth, they're looking for some of what others have. It starts with connections and relationships. So I guess that some of them were even digitally excluded, like so 25% of Glasgow's population are disabled, it seems like. So the fact that they're not fighting for disabled rights, or sorry, these people are, the fact that the government's not is its own thing. Mermaids launches pioneering scheme to help making young trans and non-binary people's voices heard. So Mermaids, which is a long-standing group in the UK, is trying to give voices to trans people. So, Britain's equalities watchdog, the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, has become consumed by anti-trans sentiment. In a recently issued separate and single-sex service providers offering what LGBTQ groups said amounted to appalling and harmful guide on how services could legally exclude trans people. Basically, Mermaids is fighting back against that. More UK LGBTQ plus phobia. Cruel Home Office denied asylum to 25 LGBT plus men who fled Afghanistan for their lives because denying asylum to, you know, marginalized groups from other countries is revealed that 25 Afghan men were denied asylum on sexuality grounds by the Home Office, but none were subsequently deported. Those men had their asylum applications denied after the Home Office changed its guidance to say Afghanistan was a safe place for LGBT plus people, so long as they didn't, quote unquote, seek to cause public outrage. What, by existing? The LGBT plus people in Afghanistan have always faced persecution and violence under Sharia law. All forms of same-sex sexual activity are illegal and are punishable by death. By death. But apparently that's safe, according to the Home Office. The outlook got worse after the Taliban. We mentioned the Taliban's previous ruling when they seized power in August of 2021. Stuff has slowly gone down since then. As authoritarian type regimes do, which I assume Taliban is. I suppose I don't know for sure with the Taliban, but there's a high probability when it comes to anti-LGBT plus laws. So, I accidentally brought this up earlier, but for Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK, members of the LGBTQ plus community who are living with bipolar disorder share the reality of being in this rarely discussed intersectionality. Borderline personality disorder, not bipolar personality disorder. That's BPD. No, wait. Bipolar, whatever, borderline personality disorder, which intense rapidly cycling emotions, blah blah blah, causes are unclear. Many people with borderline personality disorders will have experienced trauma and neglect as children. Naturally, it's stigmatized. It's an emotional thing. People can manage it in a number of ways. Insufficient evidence that increases the likeliness of violent behavior. Living with borderline personality disorder can mean not having a sense of self, which is understandable. it says queer people are more likely to be diagnosed, but that might be partially because, well, especially if you're trans and you have gender dysphoria, historically therapy is like the main way you can get stuff done. I mean, it still is to some degree, because I need to have like a long time therapist to get bottom surgery covered by the state. But also, if childhood trauma is a potential cause, that would also increase the likeliness too, to be fair. But there's so many negative. This is one of those ableist things where if you're different in the wrong way, you are seen as a potential threat. Which is its own problematic thing. But yeah, visibility is important with that, which is why I'm still sad that Sophia is no longer with us. She had borderline personality disorder, and she was open about it, and yeah, fight for the fallen. Treasury hides documents that show inequality impact of Richie asshole Sunak's spring statement. So disabled people reacted with disbelief. I'm not sure how much disbelief disabled people actually. In March, the Chancellor's cruel decision to all but ignore those who rely on benefits, even as the Office for Budget Responsibility was warning that the real value of benefits was set to fall by 5%. So disabled people are already starving in some parts of Britain, and Richie Sunak is Vicky Foxcroft has her own issues, but Labor is kind of its own mess. Treasury's, they called for Treasury's release of the two documents. The unlawful national disability strategy admits that the government doesn't own enough data on disabled people. Yeah, that's BS. That report clearly demonstrates how disabled people have been struggling with their finances even before the current cost of living crisis. So cost of living has gone up in Britain, and disabled people have been getting the same amount of money. And yeah, in his 3,500 word speech in March, Richie Sunak announced a rise in the starting threshold on national insurance due to temporary 5 pence per liter cut on fuel duty, so an extra 500 million in the household support fund. But there was no mention in his speech of disabled people and how many of them were struggling to survive, and no attempt to increase benefits to match the sharply rising rate of inflation. And part of the reason for the rate of inflation is because of Brexit. That's its own other story. Finally, I breathe a sigh of relief. I need to significantly cut down the number of stories. It's hard. It is really hard to cut down the number of stories because I cared about like every one of them. So the trans community breathes a sigh of relief. Breathing is important. I have heard as Supreme Court rejects puberty blockers case. So Kirabel did a whole case against puberty blockers being given to trans kids, and it was law for a bit that puberty blockers couldn't be given to trans kids. That being said, that law was rejected, so apparently they're trying again with the transphobic groups. I see that smug look on your face, Jinx Tiamat. That's an inside joke, don't worry about it. So basically they overturned it previously, and then they tried to bring another case, and the Supreme Court in the UK took it down, so yay. And that's it, really. I thought for a second there was one more, but this is just yeah, this is the actual court opinion that was leaked on Politico. So I'm not reading this 98-page document. You can read it yourself on Politico, where it was leaked. That being said, that's the end of the show. I am still Ozma in the Dark. I will be streaming League in a little bit after this. I'm going to end the stream to take a short break, and then I'll be back on to play some League. I did not intend for this to be as long as it was, but ending on a sigh of relief. Yes. I think yeah, I might have to break this up into... I'll either have to break this up into a couple days, which may not be a good idea. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. I'll figure things out. So, yeah, I will play the ending. That being said, I have suspicion... Oh, hey, Everyday Stoners. Thanks for the follow. I know I forgot to mention that with Joe Biden's diaper, but I was not sure about the nature of Joe Biden's diaper, so I was concerned about thanking for that person for the follow. But thank you, Everyday Stoners. That immediately seems like a much more friendly name. So yeah, you stayed till the end or just popped in right here at the end, but I will be streaming League. You can always chat with me on League. I will talk about political stuff, trust me, in like 15 minutes or so, 15-20 minutes, something like that. I have to play the ending. One of the people I have in the ending who did a lot of work for civil rights for women, and I believe that person might be the person I picked. That person might be one of the people who won a Nobel Peace Prize, but also has since committed war crimes against Muslim people. I'm not sure, and just saying. I'll fix that before next show. I'll look into it. I didn't have time because I didn't think of it. But if that's the person on there, I will cut them out of the stream ending. So with that said, bye everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you had a good time.
Is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
We want no more segregation. We will accept no more discussion of segregation. And I would appreciate it if you would stop shaking your head in agreement when I don't think you understand what we are talking about.
Sex and race, because they are easy, visible differences, have been the primary ways of organizing human beings into superior and inferior groups, and into the cheap labor on which this system still depends.
No, you all tell me to go and hide my tail between my legs. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all?
Freedom is merely privilege extended unless enjoyed by one and all.
I do believe that all of you can help us in our endeavors. We do need to have friends. We need those who believe in us.
All we are doing with this bill is allowing two people who love each other to have that love recognized by way of marriage. That is all we are doing.
Sometimes, especially in this body, I feel as though if Christ himself walked through these doors and said what he said thousands of years ago, he would be maligned as a radical and rejected from these doors.